Welcome to my neighborhood, where I'll interview several industry luminaries and interesting people who are changing the state of the art in accounting software technology. Some of my guests are CEOs of leading corporations that you may have already heard of, maybe you're already using their products, or I think will soon be using their products, as well as some interesting thought leaders who help us learn more about technology and how to put it to use. Today I have with me Jennifer Warawa, the Vice President and General Manager for Sage Accountants Network at Sage North America. She went to Harvard Business School, and then she owned and operated an accounting firm in Canada for 12 years. Most recently, she's been recognized by the Accounting Today magazine, the top 100 most influential people in accounting from 2010 through 2013. She's also been recognized by the CPA Practice Advisor in the top 40 under 40 category since 2010. She's also been recognized by the SMB Influencer Award for 2013 and the Most Powerful Women in Accounting for 2013. So please help me welcome Jennifer Warawa. Welcome to the neighborhood, Jennifer.
Thanks for having me.
So great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
And this is your first trip out to Pleasanton, where we are
I know.
today. So
what took me so long, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, you and I go way back, and I've been a fan of yours since I first met you. I just think what you're doing in your career and in your life is something that we can all learn from. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions about what makes you tick.
Uh-oh. Sounds
Are
serious.
you ready? So, what led you into what you're doing today? I mean, can you take me, this is maybe going to be a series of questions around what got you to where you are. Take me back to when you were a young child. Was there stuff that you knew you wanted to become?
Yes. So I wanted to be a teacher. So clearly I got out of that somewhere along the way.
No, you're still teaching.
I'm still teaching. Oh goodness, that's scary. I wonder what lessons I'm teaching. That could be could be concerning. Yeah, so I always wanted to be a teacher until I think it was like 11th grade when you go and you spend a week in the life.
Right.
And by like Wednesday, I was like, and teaching, no, I mean, it was just so regulated. And I think that I envisioned being able to inspire people and lead people, and there's just so much regulation. And I'm like, not that accounting doesn't have regulation, don't get me wrong.
That's right, yeah.
So after that, I was like, my whole life I'd been thinking I was going to be a teacher, and then all of a sudden you realize that's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
So after high school, I actually took 6 months and I went to Australia and lived and worked there. It was a lot of fun. And when I came back, it's like, okay, so I got to start college. What am I going to do? And so I was working at my stepdad's business. He's been an entrepreneur since he was a teenager.
Uh-huh.
And so I was working in his business, and his bookkeeper, an in-house accountant, quit. And so he's like, hey, could you just do this while you're working here? And I'm like, I don't know anything about accounting. I mean, I know what I learned in school. And he goes, well, you were wondering what to go to college for. This would be good.
So how old were you at this point?
19.
So you're just still a kid. You're basically out of high school. And
yes, out of high school, wondering what to go to college for. So I'm like, I should go to college for accounting, so I know what I'm doing here, because I don't really know what I'm doing. Right. So that's what I did. And when I wasn't in school, I was at his business, running his books and starting to do the financials. And I've always been entrepreneurial. I'm always the person that was like, in school. Right. This sounds really geeky, actually. Running a school store. I just really loved entrepreneurship. Like, I just loved being able to drive change and lead change, as you would say, not manage change, lead change.
This is right, lead.
And so while I was in school, anytime you can see an opportunity to be able to provide services or do something different. So I saw these people when I was in college they hated typing their own papers. So I was like, geez, I can type 100 words a minute. That's like 5 pages an hour, which is, if I'm charging $5 a page, I'm like $25 an hour. Minimum wage was like $7. I'm like, man, I could be making and so I started doing that. And so I started this little business, and as I went through and became more proficient at accounting, I'm like, people were like, hey, you do accounting, right? Can you help me with this? And it just was this natural progression. And
so you sort of arrived at the accounting profession by having an interest in the way sort of business develops products and services and charges for them and profitability, so sort of from the business angle.
It was totally from the business angle. Yeah. It was like an in-house accountant, and then just started, people were
Right.
like, well, can you look at this? Well, since you
Right.
already know, and help me with that.
So
And
then you went on to actually run an accounting firm, your own
Yes,
firm,
yes, yeah.
for like a long time.
yeah, 12 years.
Yeah.
12 years.
So when it got to debits and credits, did that get boring for you? Because I don't think you're doing
No.
many of those things today. But
No.
what you went like off in the weeds with debits and credits, and then realized your heart was maybe completing your sentences
no, I
for
think
you. but-
I think that you start to realize it was interesting because I think when I was in high school, I didn't love accounting because it was debits and credits,
Right.
and I was too young to understand the story that the numbers told.
Right.
And so through my stepdad's business and starting to work with other companies, I started to understand the story that the numbers told, and I loved telling that story. So it wasn't very long into my business when I started hiring people to say, okay, other people can actually go and be processing the data and building the
Right.
numbers, and I can actually meet with the clients and tell them the story that the numbers are telling. And that was my passion, is meeting with
Yeah.
businesses and saying, this is what's going on in your business. And so it was just a lot of fun. Like
Yeah.
that was the part that I just loved.
That's great, because that's what's going on today in the cloud revolution, if you will, for the accounting profession. There's so much now that we can get out of the weeds of just doing transaction processing and get much more into the client consulting and helping them run their business like a partner in their business, as opposed to here's last year's financial statement, which they can do nothing about. So
Yeah.
you were ahead of your time in a sense by you were attracted by the relationship with the client.
Yes,
As opposed
and that's
to-
where they got the value.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, anyone
Right.
can be in the back putting the numbers, putting
Right.
all the data in and just spitting out reports. It's to make sense of the
Yeah.
reports in a way that's very
Yeah.
sensible. And I think working in my dad's business, you had to do that.
Right.
You had to, because he's like, tell me what this means. So I learned
Right.
it's like, okay, he doesn't want the financial statement. He doesn't even want to look at it. He wants you to tell him what's going on in the
Yeah.
business. And so
I really think you were ahead of your time, because I almost wanted to say, when you were saying anybody could do that, well, not really, and certainly not in the old days. So in the past 30 years or so, it's been a very much of a high art, well, more than 30 years really, high art to actually be able to produce that financial statement. That
That's
is
true.
and
well, that was the easy part.
yeah,
And-
relatively.
Yeah, relatively.
right.
I mean, but it wasn't I would say it wasn't the fun part. I mean,
Right.
it needed to be done to be
Right.
able to have the fun part.
Right.
But it was really when people are like, I get what's going on in my
Yeah.
business, and
Yeah. So, as you went from the school, what did you call it? The school cafeteria, or what were you were selling?
typing
Typing up
people's,
people's
yes.
things, and so as you went from that sort of entrepreneurial experience then into accounting, you must have reached points along the way where it was really not working. Maybe you started your own business and realized this is really hard. I got to actually make enough money to live and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What were some of the difficulties that you can identify that really were, you got yourself through them, and
Yeah.
what can we learn from
Well,
your experience there?
I think when I was taking accounting at college, so I started doing the books for my stepdad's company. Well, like before my course even started, before I even
Right.
started going to college. So I really was like, at the time it was simply accounting. I was in
Sure.
Canada, and so I'm entering stuff, kind of looking at what the person before me did and making
Right.
up what needed to be done. So it was, it was just I was young. I mean, I was 19, right?
Right.
And so after a couple of years, when I had some experience, some classroom experience and some real life experience, and people started saying, hey, I know you do this there. Could you help me? You've done some typing for me, for example, for a business, or you've done this brochure design or whatever.
Right.
We were getting audited, and I feel like I don't understand why. Can you take a look at this?
Right.
And so you take a look, and get someone out of a pinch, and they'd refer you to a bunch of people.
Right.
And I think it was great until someone would say, so how old are you? And then you're like, I'm 23 or 24, and it was like, okay,
Right.
so they realize the role that you're playing in their business, and that you're young to be
Yeah.
doing that, and it's like that can be a little bit scary. It's almost a barrier sometimes.
Were you
to
afraid
them.
to kind of, and you're female, was that a problem?
So-
I assume that.
Yeah, it was for sure. And my stepdad had a manufacturing business and manufactured trailers.
Oh boy.
So it was a very, very much like I'm talking about,
Right.
Torflex axles and all this. It was like shop talk, right? So
Yeah,
it was a very different business. It was a manufacturing company, and so that was different. Just being a woman in that industry.
Did you feel people actually in trying to prevent you from succeeding or from being part of that, or did you feel any of that?
I think if anything, it was the customer. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
they'd be like, "Oh, is there someone around that I could talk to about a trailer or something?" I'm like, "Yeah,
Right.
you can
It
talk
was
to me."
hidden.
Yes,
It was
yeah. I was
hidden,
like, "You can talk
they
to me
didn't
right now."
want-
And they're like, "Well, I want to know about the axles." I'm like, "What do you want to know?" So it was fun though.
Right.
I actually really enjoy stuff like that. Like
Right,
I enjoy challenges, and I think that was just
Right.
a different kind of challenge.
Yeah. So, was there an aha moment somewhere in your life where you knew what your mission would be?
I think my mission's always changing. So I think it's, I don't even know when I think about my mission 10 years from now. I mean, I think about, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, where do you think you'll be in 5 years? I don't know that I'd be saying I'd be living in Atlanta, Georgia. So I
Yeah.
think it's always changing. I think, when I think back to aha moments in my life, you know this, my mother passed away in an accident when she was 50, just a couple months before her 51st birthday. And I think that's a big wake up call, and I think that sometimes those types of moments get overlooked when you're thinking of life. I did not miss the wake up call, if you will, around, lots of people have a bucket list that they're saving for retirement, and both my mom and my stepdad both passed away before they ever hit that retirement age.
Yeah.
So I think it's about living in the moment, and life's too short to be unhappy or to not pursue your dreams or to not think big.
Right.
And so it just is pulling that bucket list forward and saying you don't know what the future holds. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of
Mhm.
uncertainty, there's health challenges, so it's just like you just have to,
You really never know.
you don't know. Yeah.
Well, so maybe that explains why I see in you always a willingness to kind of set business aside and make sure people are good.
Yeah.
You've done that several times with me. So we're doing business together sometimes and separately as well. But I notice how you're engaging your friends in your community as well as your employees. So maybe that's part of why you got that wake up call and say, hey, it's about life, not about achievement per se. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Yeah, and I think that growing up in an entrepreneurial family too, you realize fairly early on how much trust impacts life and business. And I think that say old school entrepreneurs, like I think about my stepdad as like an
Right.
old school entrepreneur, grew up on the farm and just had a really solid set of
Yeah.
values. And I think one of those values is building trust.
Yeah.
And I think it's just about being honest and caring about people first.
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think people can tell the difference genuinely when you genuinely care about them versus, hey, how's it going? And you're kind of running off before you even get the answer. And so I think that genuine caring is really really critical.
I thank you for saying that because we talk a lot about small business. You live in a large business as an employee and a leader in a large business, but you started out in a small business and most of your life was there. And I think a lot of people buy from small businesses and they trust the small business, the shopkeeper up the street and those sorts of things. And larger companies don't have that, generally don't have that kind of touch with the customer. And so you're touching on trust here, you're touching on the small business in you, and you've sort of brought that to your job in big business. You're somebody people can reach out to and they know they're going to get a straight answer. It might not be what they want, but it's the truth. And I think that's what you do a lot is develop
Thank
that
you.
trust. So
Thank you.
and of course that's what we think so much about the accounting profession overall. I mean, trust is the basis of everything.
Yeah.
So
The basis of all businesses, I think.
it really is. Without it, you just can't go anywhere. So, what motivates you today in your senior role at a large company? You get up in the morning. What's motivating you the most in your current role?
Well, there is never a mundane day. I have been, 6.5 years with Sage, and I don't think I've ever had a day where it's been
Right.
boring or even any piece of boring. There's not even a sign of any mundane task. Or I mean, it's very exciting. It's an exciting time to be in the accounting profession, period, as you know.
Right.
And then Sage is, we're in a period of reinvention too. We're moving
Right.
our business from into the cloud. So we
Right.
have desktop solutions and we're building cloud solutions. And so there's a lot of transformation. And I really enjoy that. I enjoy the transformation.
Right.
And I also think it's, it's interesting because people talk about coming from a business and then working in a corporation. Is that really different? And it is different, but Sage is a very entrepreneurial company.
Right.
And so I think that I feel it's different, but I feel as though I have almost as much control as I had when I had my business. Of course, there's Sage's direction, but you still get that entrepreneurial opportunity, and I think it's really exciting. I mean, when I had a business, it was very fast-paced, and I was worried, is it going to be the same pace when I go to a large company? And if anything, it's been faster. Faster. And so I think, I get up early, I get to the office early, I like to get an early start, and sometimes it'll be like, oh my gosh, it's 6 o'clock, I haven't even had lunch. And I love that. I love that it's so exciting that you forget to eat lunch.
Right. So you're motivated by the changes that are going on in the profession and in the technology space, and that you get to have a big impact on all of that, because now you've got, I would imagine, you've got a lot of, well, we'll just call it power to have a whole bunch of people take a direction that you see a need for your company to go in. Would that be accurate?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe that's the one drawback we have as small business people. I've got a small company myself, and I can have an idea, and who's going to do that?
Yeah.
And maybe you have a little more access to that than
it
a
is.
smaller business.
It is interesting because the part that's different in a large company is taking that hat off that you wear when you have a small business where you're doing everything. I mean, someone doesn't show up for work and you find yourself doing their job, whatever that might be. And as you evolve in a larger corporation, it's like you need to learn that you can't wear all the hats anymore because you have a role that really needs to be filled, and there's other people wearing these hats. And so it is making that progression while still keeping the entrepreneurial spirit. So it's a balance.
So I'm a young product manager in a company, or marketing manager, or in the advertising department, and I've been in my job for 2-3 years, and I'm in a large organization. What advice would you give me if I had the goal to be you? How do I get to a level in a company? Because I want to be VP someday, because that seems like a place I want to be. So do I want to be, and how do I get there if I want to be?
Yeah. It's interesting. I was having a conversation last week with our CFO, Mark Scheib, and it's along the same regards, and we were talking about what makes a really strong leader.
Right.
And I think that experience in all the areas of a business make for great leadership opportunities. So, when you've had experience in sales and product management and marketing, you get this wide range of insight into the business and how it runs, and you can bring all that together and be able to be a different type of leader. So I think the opportunity to try different roles or be part of different roles and get an understanding of that area of the business make you a well-rounded leader. And you get to do that as a business owner to start with. You learn things you probably don't even want to learn sometimes. You're like, how did I end up doing this?
Yeah.
And
so I should look around my company for other roles I can take on my journey to move up the ladder. I've got to first move across.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's opportunities. I think that you have an idea in your mind of where you think your career is going to go.
Right.
And so I think if you would have said to me in even 11th grade or some point in high school, you're going to get into accounting, I would have said, no, I took accounting. I don't ever want to do that. But I think there's opportunities that open up, and you see things in a different light, and so to be open to those changes, because that's where you might have an opportunity where someone needs you to do something that you never envisioned yourself doing, and that's a whole new journey for you to go down, and I think that's what's really exciting.
So along the way, you've had all these different roles. Have you ever fired yourself from a job? You just said, this is not for me, I gotta, you might call it quit, but I like to call it fire yourself.
Yeah. So that's normally when I'm firing myself in things, it's things in my personal life, so if you will. So I remember I had a colleague, a long time ago, early in my career, and he said the most important lesson I ever learned is if I don't love it, and and I'm not good at it, I'm going to pay someone else to do it. And I was like, well, that's crazy. Like, you need a lot of money to pay someone to do all this stuff. And he said, I'm not gonna do these things that are going to take time away from my family and from my personal life I work hard and then I'm, you know, like for example, he was talking about cutting the grass or whatever. If you don't
Sure.
love it, try and
Right.
get other people to do it. And so I think that having that family time and having that kind of time to
Right.
unwind is so important. And I think it's hard to let go of things because they're all things you can do.
Yeah.
And that's the problem too. When you're an entrepreneur, you're just like, oh, I can do that. Well, of course,
Yeah.
there's lots of things you can do, but what should you do?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think right now, as we're growing the accountant business at Sage, and I'm rounding out my team, I'm looking for people who do things that complement what I do in areas where like that person is so much brighter than I am in that area. They're just
Right.
they're amazing, and that's what I need. And I think sometimes it's scary because when you're hiring people are like, oh, that person might be better than me at that. It's like, well, that's good. That's what should happen.
The best
but
leaders hire better people.
yeah,
Right?
but it's you
Right.
know, some
Right.
people don't like to go that path.
So do you find it difficult to let go of a project or a role that you've hired somebody in that's this person that's better? Do you have trouble letting them do it, or do you find it easy to do
I
that?
don't anymore. So I think you know, I think when I first started at
Mhm.
Sage, I think when you're used to doing all these things,
Right.
you do find it hard to let go, and it didn't take very long before it does get easier. And I
Yeah.
think someone on my team gave me the greatest compliment. I don't know if they meant it to be, but they said, you know, you're a great manager because you don't micromanage.
Mhm.
And I think as a leader, my job is to remove roadblocks for my team.
That's right.
So they should be able to come and say, this is where I'm getting stuck, and I can help them get unstuck. And so
Right.
I think you let them do what they're good at, and when they get stuck, just freeing them up from that is the most important thing you can do. And if you're busy in the details and trying to
Right.
micromanage or do it for them, you're missing,
Right.
you know, a greater opportunity for them and for you.
Right. Well, sort of on that same area there, sometimes you get somebody, they seem like they were good at first, and you got to let them go. How do you deal with things like this? Inevitably, you've got to let people go or switch their jobs out, essentially
Yeah.
fire them from at least the role.
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you handle those things?
I think when you have to make a difficult decision like that, it should never be a surprise for someone.
Mhm.
I don't think it's ever fair for someone that's sitting on the other side of the table to say, well, I never saw that coming.
Right.
Because those conversations evolve over time,
Right.
and you should always be honest with the people that are on your team or people that you work for that are working for you.
Right.
And so it's an evolution of discussion on, you know, challenges that you're having or things that
Right.
aren't working. And so
Right.
they're not as difficult. If you have to surprise someone and they thought everything was going great, and then one day you say, "Oh, this isn't working," that's not good. That's
more
not pleasant.
Your
That's where it's-
failure than theirs. Is that sort
absolutely,
of what you're
absolutely.
saying?
As a leader, that's a failure. But I
Yeah.
also think it makes it a lot harder. You know,
Mhm.
it's challenging for them. So I just think being honest all the
Mhm.
way along. And I say that I remember early in my business, I had someone that was working for me, and one day they came into my office and said, "I just want to let you know that I quit." And I was shocked, and I was, what happened? And they said, "I'm just overwhelmed. I've got too much on my plate. I'm doing too many things." And I was like, that was the first I'd heard of it.
Right.
And so from that point on, it's like, okay, I wasn't right. You know, it was, what's my role
You
in
weren't
this
in touch.
situation as leader? Was I
Mhm.
not asking the right questions? Did I, I
Yeah.
obviously didn't understand what was going on in their life.
Right.
And so I think that two-way communication is so important. Neither one of you should be surprised by
Mhm.
something like that comes up. You should be able to have that ongoing dialogue, but it takes
Yeah.
asking a lot of questions.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. I think as a manager myself, I think about, how much do we really know about each other and all of our employees,
Yeah.
and it's not like you want to dig into their personal life, but maybe that's impacting something going on, or
Yeah.
so you just being in touch more often. So, do you have a hero?
Yeah, I mean, I was, whenever I get asked this question, so that's a tough question. I have a
Mhm.
lot of people that I respect in business. I respect you, honestly. You've done an amazing job with the Sleeter group, and just I value your honesty and your integrity. And so when I work with different leaders, I like to be able to pull away different pieces that they're really good at. It
Mhm.
could be that they're really good at, a certain kind of motivational leadership, or they're really good at understanding the finances and turning that into a story. And so I think it's a lot of different people for a lot of different reasons. I mean, I keep referencing going back to my stepdad, but if it wasn't for him, I'm not sure that I would have had that entrepreneurial spirit. He, from a very early age, it was like, okay, talked about getting into business, and,
Mhm.
he kind of brings you to work with him. And I'm sure you've encountered the same
Yeah.
thing with Tom. I'm sure Tom's come many
Sure.
times, and,
Yeah, excellent.
that's how you get introduced to entrepreneurship and,
Right.
and get
Yeah.
excited for the opportunity. And so I think watching him I like leaders where I can learn through example. So it's
Right.
great to hear a leader speak about their leadership style, but what I really enjoy is watching someone lead and learning
Yeah.
through their example, and that's
Yeah.
some of the greatest lessons that I've ever got.
Yeah. Well, just want to comment a little bit on that. I see certain people in the world, Richard Branson, for example, that are doing 20 things and knocking them all out of the ballpark.
I know. Yeah.
And I think, well, I'm trying to do one thing, and I'm so busy I can't even imagine doing a second thing. Are you in that same category? I mean, you're really focused on one job. Do you think you'll have other things in your life as well? You seem to have this ability to do so many things simultaneously.
I think it's interesting because you think that you don't have that ability until someone pushes you and you add one more thing and you need to let go of something else. And I think it's when you're pushed a little bit outside your comfort zone that you realize what you're capable of.
Right.
And so our CEO is he's great at that, because you'll say, well, I'm going to do this, and he'll say, well, actually, I think you should do that. And you're like, I don't even know how I'm going to do that. And he's like, that's kind of what he wants, is you to say, how am I going to figure it out? And so that's where you're getting different people with different skill sets and reinventing the way you do things. You're being pushed. And I think it's when you get outside your comfort zone, you really do find out you're capable of more than you thought.
Maybe when you're playing a sport with somebody against someone and they're better than you, it's almost more fun because you're learning and you're improving as opposed to somebody that you're consistently beating.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Can you tell me what your vision of the future of accounting is?
Well, I think it's kind of builds on the discussion we were having earlier, because I think it is about going beyond reporting and these static financial statements that are just this printout for the purpose of keeping the IRS happy. It's like, here's your tax information. I think it's about providing real-time value, and I think that's the benefit that the cloud brings is the ability to have access anytime, anywhere to the financials and make sense of what's going on in your business right now, not what happened last quarter. It's never valuable for someone when you let them know that, hey, it looks like you ran out of money last quarter. They're like, yes, I'm aware of that when I miss payroll. So it's about having those real-time insights and turning it into actionable advice. And so it sounds easy, and I think when people talk about even the cloud, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to move technology. I'm going to move from using on-prem software to the cloud, and I'm going to be modern, and I've made this shift.
Right.
But it's a whole business model transformation, because if you don't shift how you're using that information to serve your clients, you've missed the whole opportunity. It's not a technology shift, it's about the way you do business. And so the technology is an enabler, but it's about figuring out how do you rework your business model, and that's the greatest opportunity and the greatest challenge for the profession, is figuring out, how am I going to take this new opportunity that's been given to me, where I can call my client and say, I'm thinking about payroll next week, and I'm looking at your cash flow, and I think we're going to have a challenge. And that's a whole different business model. But the person will say, well, is it tax season? I thought I only talk to you once a year. It's like, it gives you this opportunity, but you have to take it.
I read a study from Oxford University recently that predicted the likelihood of job losses in various industries over the next 20 years. And it said auditors and accountants had a 94% chance of losing jobs over the next 20 years. Now, it was a gross statistic, right? Well, I've always said, well, that's assuming they continue doing exactly what they have been doing, which is very transactional oriented, very backward looking, very compliance oriented. How will software, you're in the software business, how will software change my what I do for a living and automate a lot of those things? How will you see it being the tool that really delivers me to this new advisory space, if you will?
Yeah, I think, a lot of it, when you think about bank integration, for example, that data flow from the bank, where when you open your software, all the transactions are already there.
They're already there,
you think back 5 years ago, and that was someone's full-time job. It was data entry for someone's job. So it changes that job altogether. All of a sudden, job goes away, and technology has automated it. But it also gives you an opportunity to access that information in a way that you haven't been able to in the past. And so it changes everything. But there are still people in the back office doing data entry right now.
Yeah.
So I think it's the, will people make the shift? And I
Yeah.
think it's almost like, is this a trend? It's like, no, it's not a trend. It's just a
happening.
fact. It's the future. It's happening right now. And so I think people's ability to change is going to be critical.
Yeah, and I've found a lot of people are fearful about this, and their cheese is moving. So
Absolutely.
Are you saying that unless they change, they'll be, like the study says, really out of work, or will there be roles for those people who really like typing transactions in somewhere?
I'm sure there will be a role. I meet someone, I think, at every accounting conference that still is using DOS on some computer in their office.
Right,
so
yeah.
I'm sure there'll be a role for them somewhere. It's just
Right.
they're going to be fewer and far between. And
Right.
what kind of role do you want to have?
And what kind of money will you make doing that?
Absolutely. And I think when you talk to people in the accounting profession and you say, why did you get into business? They see an opportunity to help people. And I
Right.
think that's why they got in the first place. And then
Right.
somehow maybe it went a little bit off path and they ended up doing this data entry and
because it takes forever to
they're
do.
crunching the numbers.
So
and
that's their job.
Yeah, and so when you talk about freeing them up to get back to what they really loved in the first place,
Right.
it's pretty exciting, but it's a little bit scary at the same time.
Yeah.
I think anytime you read a study like that and you see that the cheese is moving, as you say, I think that's an opportunity. So
Yeah.
I think the people that can say, how can I move quickly to follow the cheese instead of being someone whose role is going to disappear and I didn't see it coming,
Yeah.
I think there's a huge opportunity for those that are willing to take the opportunity to change early.
Yeah.
I guess it's not early anymore, but they're willing to change.
That's right. Well, thank you again. It's been very nice to have you in the neighborhood. Skeeter thanks you.
Thank you.
And the Sleeter Group thanks you, and I hope to see you again soon.
Thanks,
Thank
Doug.
you.
It's been great being here.
So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next time.